In 1943, a German Luftwaffe pilot vanished over the Swiss Alps carrying documents so dangerous that his own country sent fighters to shoot him down. 70 years later, when the melting glacier finally released his frozen cockpit, investigators discovered he wasn't running from the war, he was running from orders to help murder thousands more efficiently in the death camps. The metal glinted in the afternoon sun, a dull gray against the brilliant white of the Aletsch Glacier. Dr. W. Heinrich Weber knelt beside the exposed debris, his weathered hands trembling as he brushed away ice crystals. After 40 years studying glaciers in the Swiss Alps, he knew what he was looking at. Aircraft wreckage. World War II era. Judging by the riveting patterns, Heinrich pulled out his radio and called the base station. Within hours, Swiss federal police had cordoned off the area. His grandson Lucas arrived the next morning, badge in hand and questions already forming. Lucas Weber had investigated plenty of cases during his 8 years with the police, but never one that involved his grandfather. He studied the twisted metal protruding from the ice, noting the faded remnants of a painted cross on what appeared to be a wing section. German, he thought. Luftwaffe. The recovery team worked carefully, using heated tools to melt the ice without damaging the wreckage. As more of the aircraft emerged, they could make out the distinctive shape of a Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighter. The tail section bore a partially visible identification number. Lucas photographed everything and sent the images to German military archives in Munich. The response came within 24 hours, and it made his chest tighten. The aircraft belonged to Hauptmann Klaus Steinberg, reported missing on December 18, 1943. Last known position was supposed to be 80 kilometers north, near the German border. The file was marked with classification symbols Lucas had never seen before, requiring authorization from both German and Swiss intelligence agencies. His grandfather approached as Lucas read the report on his tablet. Heinrich's face had gone pale. "Do you remember anything about a German plane crash in '43? Lucas asked. Heinrich stared at the emerging wreckage for a long moment. "I was 17 working with the resistance. There were rumors that winter, whispers about a Luftwaffe pilot who tried to reach Switzerland. Some said he was defecting, others said he was shot down. We searched these mountains for weeks but found nothing." The old man's voice grew quiet. "I never forgot those rumors. 70 years I've been walking these glaciers, and all this time he was here, waiting to be found." Lucas looked at the wreckage, then at the coordinates. Klaus Steinberg had been flying deep into Swiss territory when he crashed. This wasn't a combat loss or navigation error. This was something else entirely. What was he carrying? Lucas wondered aloud. Heinrich placed a hand on his grandson's shoulder. "That's what you need to find out. And Lucas, be careful. Men don't fly solo missions into neutral territory without reason. Whatever brought him here was important enough to die for." Lucas spent the next 3 days buried in archives, piecing together Klaus Steinberg's service record. The official Luftwaffe reports painted a simple picture of a decorated pilot who vanished during routine patrol. But nothing about the crash location matched that story. Klaus had joined the Luftwaffe in 1939, flew combat missions over France and Russia, earned the Iron Cross for bravery. His record showed steady promotions, commendations from superior officers, and a spotless loyalty assessment. He was married to Anna Hoffmann in 1941. They had a daughter, Marie, born in 1942. The final entry was dated December 18, 1943. Mission type, Border Patrol. Expected return, 1400 hours. Status, missing, presumed killed in action. Lucas compared the official flight path with the actual crash coordinates. The discrepancy was impossible to ignore. Klaus should have been patrolling the northern frontier, but his aircraft was found 60 kilometers south, deep inside Swiss airspace. He called his grandfather that evening. Heinrich answered on the second ring. "I need to know everything you remember about 43, Lucas said. "Every rumor, every whisper about that German pilot." Heinrich was quiet for a moment. "Come to the house tomorrow. There are things I haven't spoken about in 70 years. The next morning, Lucas sat in his grandfather's study while the old man pulled out a worn wooden box from his closet. Inside were papers, photographs, and a faded notebook filled with handwriting. "This was my resistance journal," Heinrich said, opening the notebook carefully. "We were just kids really, passing messages, helping refugees cross the border. But we heard things." He turned to a page dated December 1943. Lucas read the cramped handwriting. German aircraft spotted flying low over Jungfrau region. Multiple witnesses report seeing fighter plane heading south, away from Germany. 2 other aircraft in pursuit. Sounds of gunfire heard. Snowstorm prevented search. They were chasing him, Lucas said. Heinrich nodded. We assumed he was trying to defect. During the war, several German pilots tried to escape to Switzerland. Most were caught. We heard rumors this one made it across the border before he crashed. Did anyone ever find out why he was running? Heinrich closed the notebook. No. The war ended. We all moved on with our lives. But I never forgot. Sometimes, late at night, I would wonder what was so important that a German officer would betray everything to reach Switzerland. Lucas pulled out his phone and showed Heinrich a photograph from the crash site. They found personal items in the cockpit. A sealed case with SS markings. Heinrich's expression darkened. Then this wasn't about defection. This was about something he was carrying. Something dangerous enough that they sent fighters to stop him. The recovery team worked for 6 days to free the aircraft from 70 years of accumulated ice. Lucas stood at the edge of the excavation site, watching as specialists carefully melted away the final layers surrounding the cockpit. The preservation was remarkable. The glacier had frozen Klaus Steinberg's final moments in time, protecting the aircraft from the decay that normally claimed crash sites. The canopy was intact, though cracked from the impact. Through the frosted glass, Lucas could see the outline of a figure still strapped in the pilot's seat. Dr. Weber approached, his face grave. We're ready to open the cockpit. Are you certain you want to be present? Lucas nodded. He had seen death before in his work, but this felt different. This was a man who had been missing for 7 decades, whose family had buried an empty coffin, whose final moments had been preserved in ice. The team carefully removed the canopy. Inside, Klaus Steinberg sat frozen in position, his leather flight jacket still buttoned, his gloved hands resting on the controls. Ice crystals covered his face, but his features were eerily well preserved. He looked young, perhaps 30, with a strong jaw and what might have been determination in his expression. The medical examiner began documenting everything while Lucas photographed the scene. On the seat beside Klaus lay a leather case, approximately 30 centimeters long, secured with a metal clasp. The SS Death's Head insignia was stamped on the cover. Personal effects were removed with careful precision. Klaus's identification papers, frozen but readable. A wallet containing a photograph of a woman holding a small child. Another photograph showed Klaus in his Luftwaffe uniform, standing beside the same woman. On the back, written in faded ink, Anna and Marie, August, 1943. If stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share in the comments where you're watching from. The pilot's logbook was discovered in a pocket of his flight jacket. The leather binding had protected the pages from moisture. Lucas watched as the examiner carefully separated the frozen pages. The final entry was dated December 18, 1943. The handwriting was rushed, almost frantic. Cannot complete assigned mission. Some orders cannot be obeyed. If this fails, tell Anna I chose love over loyalty. May God forgive what I could not do. K.S. Lucas felt cold that had nothing to do with the Alpine air. This wasn't a defection for personal safety. This was something else entirely. The sealed leather case was removed last. It remained locked, the metal clasp frozen shut. X-ray imaging showed papers inside, multiple documents, possibly photographs or technical drawings. Dr. Weber stood beside his grandson, both men staring at the case. Whatever is in there, the old man said quietly. It was worth dying for. The question is whether it's worth the truth coming out 70 years later. Lucas looked at Klaus Steinberg's frozen face. We owe him that much. He died trying to deliver a message. It's time someone listened. The sealed leather case sat on the examination table in Bern, surrounded by archival specialists and historians. Lucas had spent 2 days navigating bureaucracy to get permission to open it. German officials wanted the case transferred to Munich. Swiss authorities insisted it be examined on their soil. In the end, a compromise allowed joint examination with representatives from both countries present. Dr. Sophia Brenner, a specialist in wartime documents from the University of Zurich, carefully worked on the frozen clasp. The metal had corroded over 70 years, but the seal itself had protected the contents from moisture. The clasp finally gave way with a soft click. Inside were 12 pages of German military documents, remarkably well preserved. Sophia photographed each page before laying them out for examination. Her expression grew increasingly troubled as she read. These are transport orders, she said quietly. Dated December 15, 1943, Hauptmann Steinberg was assigned to fly a civilian passenger from Munich to a research facility near Berchtesgaden. Who was the passenger? Lucas asked. Sophia checked the manifest. Dr. Werner Brandt, listed as a chemical research specialist. No further details provided. She turned to the next document, a typed memorandum marked secret. Her hands trembled slightly as she read. This is correspondence between SS officers discussing something called Project Nabel, Project Fog. They reference increased efficiency in processing operations and mention Brandt's chemical formulas. Lucas felt his stomach tighten. What kind of chemicals? Sophia's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The memo describes a nerve agent designed for enclosed spaces. Specifically, it mentions application in concentration camp facilities to increase the rate of extermination. The room fell silent. The German observer, a historian named Ernst Kohler, moved closer to examine the documents. His face had gone pale. There were rumors after the war, Kohler said, about chemical weapons research beyond what was used in combat. But most records were destroyed. This is direct evidence. Sophia continued through the documents. The final pages contained handwritten notes in different writing than Klaus's logbook. These appear to be Dr. Brandt's personal observations. He describes his horror at how his research was being applied. He writes that he confided in the pilot during their flight, showed him documents proving the program's true purpose. Lucas picked up Klaus's photograph of Anna and Marie. He understood now. A scientist had begged a pilot for help, shown him proof of mass murder dressed up as scientific progress. Klaus had faced an impossible choice. There's more, Sophia said, holding up the final page. It's a list of names, SS officers who authorized the program, companies that supplied materials, locations where the research was conducted. And look at the date on these notes, Kohler added. December 17, 1943, one day before Klaus disappeared. He copied everything Brandt showed him, then chose to run. Lucas found Marie Steinberg through German civil records. She lived in a quiet neighborhood in Munich, a retired schoolteacher who had spent 70 years believing her father died a hero's death in service to the fatherland. He knocked on her door on a cold morning in March. The woman who answered was 72, with silver hair and her father's strong jaw. She studied his credentials carefully before inviting him inside. Her apartment was modest, filled with books and photographs. On the mantel sat a framed picture of Klaus in his Luftwaffe uniform, beside a candle that looked recently lit. I visit his memorial every year, Marie said, noticing where Lucas was looking. My mother took me there until she died in 1952. After that, I went alone. Lucas sat across from her, choosing his words carefully. Frau Steinberg, we found your father's aircraft, in the Swiss Alps. He's been there since December 1943. Marie's hands went to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded slowly, as if some part of her had always known this moment would come. There's more, Lucas continued gently. We found documents with him. Evidence that suggests he was trying to reach Switzerland deliberately, that he was carrying information about war crimes. Marie stood abruptly and walked to a cabinet in the corner. She pulled out a wooden box, similar to the one Heinrich had shown Lucas. Inside were letters, photographs, and a journal bound in faded cloth. My mother kept these hidden for years, Marie said. After my father disappeared, SS officers came to our house 3 times. They asked questions, threatened her, searched our belongings. She told them nothing because she knew nothing. But she always believed something was wrong about his death. She handed Lucas a letter, yellowed with age. It was addressed to Anna, postmarked December 18, 1943, mailed from an airfield near Munich. Lucas read Klaus's words. My dearest Anna, if you receive this, I am already gone. I cannot explain everything, but know that I discovered something terrible, something that goes against everything we believed about honor and duty. A scientist showed me proof of evil being done in Germany's name. I cannot be part of this. I cannot deliver documents that will help murder innocents more efficiently. If I die trying to stop it, at least Marie will grow up knowing her father chose humanity over orders. Forgive me for leaving you, but I cannot live as a man who enabled this darkness. I love you both, Klaus. Marie wiped her eyes. My mother read this letter every night until she died. She never remarried. She said my father was the bravest man she ever knew, even though the world called him missing. He was brave, Lucas said quietly. And now we can prove it. Dr. Sophia Brenner worked late into the night, cross-referencing the documents from Klaus's aircraft with archives across Germany and Switzerland. Lucas sat beside her in the university library, watching as she pieced together the fragments of Project Nabel. The name appears in 3 separate archives, Sophia said, pointing to her notes. German military records listed as a chemical research initiative starting in 1942. Swiss intelligence files mention it as a suspected weapons program. And here, in captured SS documentation, it's described as an efficiency enhancement project for the camps. She pulled up a digitized file on her computer. This is a report from a Swiss informant dated November 1943. A German scientist approached our border guards near Basel, requesting asylum. He claimed to have information about chemical weapons being developed for use against civilian populations. The guards turned him away, following neutrality protocols. 2 days later, Gestapo agents were seen in the area. Was it Brandt? Lucas asked. Sophia shook her head. Different name, but similar story. It appears multiple scientists tried to defect that autumn. Most were caught before reaching safety. She opened another file, this one from the German Federal Archives. After the war, Allied investigators searched for evidence of Project Nabel. The facility near Berchtesgaden had been completely destroyed in April 1945. All records burned, all equipment dismantled. The few scientists who were questioned claimed they worked on defensive gas mask research, nothing more. But Klaus's documents prove otherwise, Lucas said. Sophia's expression grew dark. Yes, and they prove something worse. Look at this list of companies that supplied materials. 3 of them still exist today as major European chemical corporations. And these SS officers who authorized the program, she traced her finger down the names, at least 5 of them escaped prosecution at Nuremberg. They lived quiet lives, died of natural causes decades later. Lucas felt anger rising in his chest. So Klaus died trying to expose war criminals who were never punished. Not just war criminals, Sophia corrected. Look at the technical formulas in Brandt's notes. These aren't crude poison gases. This is sophisticated chemical weapon research, the kind that continued long after the war ended. She pulled out a declassified intelligence report from 1968. Dr. Werner Brandt officially died in a bombing raid in March 1944. But Swiss immigration records show a Werner Brandt, German national, entered Switzerland in January 1944 and emigrated to Argentina in 1946. Klaus's sacrifice failed, Lucas said quietly. Brandt escaped anyway. Sophia closed the file. Brandt escaped without the incriminating documents. Klaus prevented those formulas and that evidence from reaching the research facility. How many lives he saved by crashing in that glacier, we'll never know. But the secret he died protecting is finally coming to light 70 years later. Klaus Steinberg's pilot logbook told the story that official records had buried. Lucas sat in the archives reading the entries, watching a loyal officer's faith crumble page by page. The early entries from 1941 were routine: flight hours, weather conditions, mechanical notes. Klaus wrote with the precision of a dedicated pilot, recording every detail of his missions over France and later Russia. By 1942, the tone began to shift. Brief mentions of things he'd seen during reconnaissance flights. A village burned to the ground, civilians fleeing along roads. In one entry from July 1942, he wrote simply, "Saw things today that have no place in warfare. Orders are orders, but some sights stay with you." The entries from 1943 grew more troubled. Klaus had been reassigned to transport duties, ferrying officers and scientists to various facilities across Germany. He wrote about conversations overheard, rumors whispered in airfield-ready rooms, doubts that grew with each mission. Then came December 15, 1943. The entry was longer than usual, written in tight, controlled handwriting that suggested Klaus was trying to keep his emotions in check. Flew Dr. Werner Brandt to briefing in Munich today. Scientist maybe 50 years old, nervous disposition. During flight he asked if I had family, told him about Anna and Marie. He showed me photograph of his own children. Then he began to cry. Said he had created something terrible, something that would be used to murder thousands more efficiently. Said the SS officers were planning to implement his research in the camps. He begged me to help him escape to Switzerland. I told him I was a German officer, that I had sworn an oath. He said some oaths must be broken when they serve evil. The next entry was dated December 17. Brandt showed me everything today. Documents, formulas, authorization letters, names of officers who approved the program. It's real. They're developing chemical agents specifically designed for the gas chambers, making murder more efficient, more cost-effective. Brandt's research, twisted into something monstrous. He's flying to the Berchtesgaden facility tomorrow. I'm assigned as his pilot. Once I deliver him and these documents, production begins within weeks. Thousands will die, because I followed orders. I cannot do this. I cannot be the man who enabled this evil. Anna would understand. She always said conscience matters more than duty. Tomorrow I fly, but not to Berchtesgaden. The final entry was written in the cockpit, Lucas realized, probably minutes before takeoff. If I fail, if they stop me, at least I tried. Better to die opposing evil than live serving it. Marie will grow up without a father, but she won't grow up with a father who murdered innocents through obedience. Some choices are impossible until you realize there's only one choice you can live with. I choose love over loyalty. God help me. Lucas found the evidence of Klaus's final flight scattered across 3 different archives. Swiss military records, German Luftwaffe logs, and eyewitness accounts from border villages all told fragments of the same desperate story. The Swiss Army Border Patrol log from December 18, 1943 recorded unusual aerial activity at 11:20 hours. 3 German aircraft observed crossing into Swiss airspace near Jungfrau region. Lead aircraft appeared damaged, trailing smoke. 2 pursuing aircraft fired upon lead plane before breaking off at border. Search operations initiated but hampered by severe weather conditions. A report from the village of Grindelwald described residents hearing engine noise and gunfire above the clouds. The local priest had written in the parish records, "Terrible sounds from the sky today, machine guns and aircraft. Engines." Prayers said for whoever was up there in that storm. The German records were harder to find. Sophia discovered them buried in Luftwaffe operational files that had been declassified only 5 years earlier. On December 18, 1943, 2 Messerschmitt Bf-110 fighters were scrambled from an airfield near Munich at 10:45 hours. Mission orders: intercept and destroy aircraft. Alpha 79er, pilot Hauptmann Klaus Steinberg, unauthorized flight path, carrying classified materials, extreme prejudice authorized. Extreme prejudice, Sophia explained to Lucas, meant shoot to kill. No warnings, no attempt at forcing him to land. They wanted him dead. The flight log showed the pursuit lasted 37 minutes. The intercepting aircraft reported engaging the target at 11:05 hours. Multiple hits confirmed on target's port wing and engine cowling. Target continued evasive maneuvers, despite damage, heading south toward Swiss border. At 11:18 hours, the pursued aircraft reported that Klaus's Messerschmitt had crossed into Swiss airspace. Standing orders prohibited German military aircraft from violating Swiss neutrality. The wingman broke off, circling just inside German territory. The final entry in the German log noted, target aircraft last observed entering cloud cover over Aletsch region, trailing heavy smoke, altitude decreasing rapidly. Visibility 0 due to snowstorm. Target presumed crashed in Swiss territory, recovery impossible. Mission classified, all records sealed. But the most compelling evidence came from an unexpected source. Heinrich had mentioned border guards witnessing the chase. Lucas tracked down the patrol reports and found a detailed account from Sergeant Franz Moser, Swiss Army, stationed at Observation Post 17. Moser had written, "Observed German fighter being pursued by 2 others, lead aircraft, clearly trying to reach our border. Took multiple hits but kept flying. When he crossed into Famar, Switzerland, the other planes turned back. We could hear him struggling to maintain altitude. The engine was dying. Then the snowstorm hit and we lost visual contact. We searched for 3 days but found nothing. The pilot never had a chance in that weather." Klaus had made it to Switzerland, Lucas realized. Wounded, damaged, pursued, but he'd crossed the border. He'd succeeded in his mission, only to have the Glacier claim him before he could deliver his cargo. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while Lucas was reviewing documents in his office. The voice on the other end was elderly, speaking German with a Hamburg accent. "My name is Dieter Hoffmann. I saw the news report about the Glacier discovery. About Klaus Steinberg. I need to speak with you immediately." Lucas arranged to meet him the following day. Hoffmann lived in a care facility outside Hamburg, a man of 91 who still walked without assistance and possessed sharp, haunted eyes. They sat in the facility's garden, and Hoffmann produced an old photograph. It showed 2 young Luftwaffe pilots standing beside a Messerschmitt Bf-110. One of them was Hoffmann, perhaps 22 years old. The other pilot Lucas didn't recognize. "That's Werner Kuhn," Hoffmann said quietly. "My wingman on December 18, 1943. The day we were ordered to shoot down Klaus Steinberg." Lucas felt his pulse quicken. "You were one of the interceptors?" Hoffmann nodded slowly. They told us Steinberg was a traitor stealing military secrets to sell to the Allies. We were scrambled with orders to destroy him before he reached Switzerland. Werner was eager, a committed Nazi, who believed every word. I had doubts, but orders were orders. What happened up there? Hoffman's hands trembled slightly. We caught up to him over the mountains. I was flight leader, so I moved in first. Standard procedure was to signal him to turn back, give him one chance to comply. But our orders said extreme prejudice, no warnings. He paused, staring at the photograph. Then Klaus radioed to us. Not pleading, not begging, he said. Dieter, I know you. You flew with my brother over France. You're a good man. What I'm carrying are documents about murdering children more efficiently in the camps. I cannot deliver them to the people who will use them. Shoot me down if you must, but let this evil die with me. Lucas leaned forward. He told you what he was carrying? Everything. He had maybe 30 seconds before Werner would open fire. Klaus said a scientist had shown him proof of chemical weapons designed for the gas chambers. He said he'd copied the documents and was trying to get them to Swiss authorities. He said if we killed him, we'd be protecting mass murderers. What did you do? Hoffman's eyes filled with tears. I fired warning shots, deliberately missed, hoped he would escape. But Werner was right behind me, and Werner believed in the cause. He put 20mm rounds into Klaus's engine and wing. I watched him struggle to maintain control, watched him head for the border trailing smoke. Werner tried to follow across the border, Hoffman continued. I had to physically block him, force him to turn back. We nearly crashed into each other. When we returned to base, I filed a report saying the target was destroyed. Werner filed the same, but I knew Klaus had made it into Switzerland. I hoped he survived. For 70 years, I hoped he delivered those documents and saved lives. He didn't survive, Lucas said gently, but his message is finally being heard. The classification stamps on Klaus Steinberg's file told a story of systematic suppression that spanned 7 decades. Lucas discovered the pattern while reviewing German intelligence records with Sophia's help. The original incident report from December 1943 labeled Klaus's flight as unauthorized departure with classified materials, requires immediate suppression. Standard procedure would have been a court-martial in absentia, public denunciation as a traitor, and seizure of family assets. Instead, the file was marked classified, restricted access, national security implications. Why would they hide a traitor instead of making an example of him? Lucas asked. Sophia pointed to a memo dated January 1944. Because they couldn't afford to explain what he was carrying. Look at this. SS headquarters ordered all references to Project Nabel removed from accessible files. The program was redesignated under a different name and moved to a new facility. Anyone who asked questions about the original project was transferred or dismissed. The cover-up continued after the war ended. Allied investigators had found references to Klaus's disappearance during the Nuremberg trials, but when they requested his complete file, German authorities claimed all records were destroyed in bombing raids. That was a lie, Sophia said, showing Lucas a document from 1946. The file existed intact. West German intelligence simply refused to release it. They claimed ongoing security concerns. Security concerns in 46? Lucas asked. The war was over. Sophia pulled up another file, this one from 1952. Several scientists who worked on Project Nabel were employed by Allied chemical weapons programs during the Cold War. The Americans recruited them, the British recruited them, even the French. If Klaus's documents became public, it would reveal that NATO countries were employing war criminals. Lucas felt disgust rising in his throat. So they buried the truth to protect their own programs? The evidence was damning. A 1968 memo between West German and Swiss intelligence agencies discussed Klaus's probable crash location. Swiss Alpine surveys had detected metal anomalies in the Aletsch Glacier, consistent with aircraft wreckage. Both governments agreed to classify the findings and postpone recovery indefinitely. The memo's justification was coldly bureaucratic. Recovery would necessitate disclosure of Project Nabel documentation, potentially compromising current NATO chemical defense initiatives and creating diplomatic complications with corporations that supplied materials to wartime programs. Recommend continued classification until all involved parties are deceased. They knew where he was, Lucas said quietly. For 45 years they knew, and they left him there. His phone rang. The caller ID showed German Federal Intelligence. A measured voice introduced himself as Director Klaus Reinhardt, Inspector Weber. I understand you've been reviewing sensitive historical files. I need you to understand that some matters remain classified for valid national security reasons. Lucas felt anger override caution. You mean you're still protecting war criminals and profiteers? The line was silent for a moment. I mean that premature disclosure could damage international relationships and ongoing security arrangements. We'd like to discuss a reasonable timeline for release. The message was clear. The cover-up wasn't over. Sophia Brenner spent 3 weeks analyzing every page Klaus had carried in that leather case. What she discovered went beyond chemical weapons research into something far more damaging to the historical narrative. The Project Nabel documents weren't just scientific formulas. They were a complete paper trail of corporate complicity and government authorization. Klaus had copied everything Dr. Brandt showed him, creating an archive of war crimes that named names and traced money. Look at this supplier list, Sophia said, spreading documents across her desk. IG Farben provided the base chemicals, but they weren't alone. 15 companies supplied specialized equipment, all of them fully aware of the program's purpose. The invoices are here, itemized and explicit. Gas chamber ventilation systems, airtight door seals, chemical dispersal mechanisms. Lucas examined the corporate letterhead. 3 of these companies still exist, Sophia nodded grimly. They changed names, merged with other firms, but the corporate lineage is unbroken. Currently, they're major chemical and engineering corporations with billions in annual revenue. If this becomes public, the lawsuits alone would be catastrophic. She turned to another section of documents. Then there are the SS authorization signatures. Klaus copied the command structure showing who approved Project Nabel at each level. 12 officers are named here, with full documentation of their involvement. How many were prosecuted at Nuremberg? Lucas asked. 2. The others either escaped to South America, changed identities, or were quietly employed by Allied intelligence services after the war. This document here, Sophia held up a memo, shows that 3 of them provided testimony to American chemical weapons programs in the 1950s. The final section was the most disturbing. Dr. Brandt's personal notes detailed not just the science but the implementation timeline. The nerve agent was scheduled for deployment in January 1944 at 3 camps. Projected efficiency increases were calculated with cold precision. Estimated cost savings were itemized. Klaus prevented this, Lucas said. By not delivering these documents, by crashing in that glacier, he stopped the program from moving forward. Sophia pulled out a final document, one Lucas hadn't seen before. It was a Swiss intelligence report from 1944. Not quite. Dr. Werner Brandt crossed into Switzerland on January 4, 1944. He claimed to be a defector seeking asylum. Swiss authorities granted him refugee status. But without the incriminating documents, Lucas realized. Exactly. Brandt told his story, but without proof, the Allies treated him as an unreliable source. He emigrated to Argentina in 1946 under the name Werner Brandt. According to immigration records, he worked as a chemical consultant until his death in 1973. So Klaus died, trying to expose criminals who escaped anyway. Lucas said bitterly. Sophia met his eyes. Klaus died making sure the evidence survived. Brandt escaped, but the corporations, the SS officers, the complete paper trail, it all stayed frozen in that glacier. And now, 70 years later, there's no statute of limitations on the truth. The negotiation over Klaus Steinberg's burial took 3 months. German officials wanted a quiet military ceremony with minimal publicity. Swiss authorities demanded transparency given the international implications. Marie Steinberg insisted her father receive full honors as a resistor, not a traitor. In the end, truth won over politics. On a June morning in 2014, Klaus Steinberg was laid to rest in Munich's Waldfriedhof Cemetery with full military honors. The German defense minister attended, along with representatives from Switzerland, Israel, and 3 Holocaust survivor organizations. Lucas stood beside his grandfather Heinrich, watching as the honor guard carried Klaus's coffin through rows of white headstones. Marie Steinberg walked behind, now 73, carrying the photograph of her father she'd kept for 7 decades. The presiding chaplain spoke of conscience and courage, of men who choose humanity over obedience. Then Marie stepped forward to read her mother's final letter, one Anna had written before her death in 1952 but requested be saved for this moment. My dearest Klaus, Anna had written, wherever you are, know that I never stopped believing in you. The officers who came to our door said you were a traitor. The official report said you abandoned your post. But I knew better. I knew the man I married, the father who held our daughter with such tenderness. the officer who once told me that honor means nothing if it serves evil. You chose conscience over country, and that is the highest form of patriotism. Marie will grow up knowing her father died trying to save lives, not take them. That is the country legacy I give her. That is the truth I carry until we meet again." Marie's voice broke as she finished reading. The cemetery was silent except for the wind moving through the trees. After the service, Lucas stood with Sophia and Heinrich at Klaus's grave. The headstone read simply, "Hauptmann Klaus Steinberg, 1913–1943, he chose humanity." The Project Naval documents had been declassified the week before. International media coverage had been extensive. 3 corporations issued formal apologies and established compensation funds. The German government opened new investigations into unprosecuted war crimes. Universities revised their historical curricula to include Klaus's story. Heinrich placed a hand on his grandson's shoulder. 70 years, he said quietly. 70 years he waited in that ice to tell his story. And now everyone knows, Lucas replied. Marie joined them, holding the folded flag from Klaus's coffin. She looked at the 3 of them, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for bringing my father home. Thank you for proving my mother was right about him." As they walked away from the grave, Lucas thought about the glacier that had preserved Klaus Steinberg's final mission. Climate change was revealing other secrets from the war, other stories frozen in time. Some men die for their country, his grandfather had said. But the true heroes die defying their country's evil. Klaus Steinberg had been a true hero. And 70 years later, his message had finally been delivered.